Shout out to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Hey guys, Spirit of the Law here. In this unique unit deep dive, I'm going to be showing and telling you about the Shotel Warrior. They dual-wield curved weapons based on actual swords from Ethiopia, and have simultaneously some of the lowest HP and highest attack of all infantry units in the game. After unique tech, the unit also has a bit of an anti-cavalry specialty, which may be a historical nod to Shotels being sometimes described as particularly effective at hooking and pulling soldiers off of horses. In this video though, we'll explore what exact roles it can play for Ethiopians in AoE2. To start with their cost, they're 10 gold more than the swordsman line, and in terms of stats, the differences are immediately obvious. They have 7 more attack than a longsword, but 15 less HP and less armor, making archers a very natural predator. Their creation time is then quite fast, at just 8 seconds per unit, dropping to 4 seconds with the elite upgrade. Compare that to 21 seconds for longswords, and the castle requirement suddenly feels a lot more manageable than for your typical unique unit. As for bonus damage, there isn't too much to remember, which is +2 against shock infantry compared to +6 for the longsword in the same matchup. And in fact, against these units, Shotels and longswords actually do very similar damage. Shotels also gain a minor +1 attack against buildings when they're elite, as well as of course +2 from arson. As we'll see, even without an inherent bonus, non-elite Shotels are plenty good against buildings in Castle Age. Worth looking at quickly as well is the Ethiopians' Castle Age unique tech, Royal Heirs, which reduces the damage they take from mounted units by 3. Now, mounted units, as you can see from this non-exhaustive list, includes a lot of different units, and on top of the obvious melee cavalry like knights, camels, cataphracts, etc., also includes ranged mounted units like conquistadors, elephant archers, and war wagons. For an example of its impact, losing 3 attack reduces cataphract damage by 17%, or the boyar by 25%, which is already enough to be noticeable, but can be even more substantial against ranged units, with Mangadai and Castle Age, for example, having their damage cut in half. At just 300 food and gold, it's a pretty useful unique tech to keep in mind depending on the civ you're up against. Obviously, don't get it against Maya, Aztec, or Incas, unless you're trying to flex with a higher technology score. Adding to the anti-cavalry aspect of the unit, another very nice quality is their speed. They're among the fastest infantry, firmly within that running animation group, as opposed to the slower walking infantry, landing in Castle Age between an Eagle Warrior and the Gabetto. That partly offsets their lower HP, as they can usually avoid fights with infantry or ranged units unless they seem favorable, or can then run those types of units down. Now though, let's get back to their signature trade-off of HP for attack, and the glass cannon nature of the unit. To give a sense of whether that's a fair exchange in melee, they actually end up beating generic longswords one-on-one, while losing to higher tier longswords, like Japanese in this example, giving us the picture of a solid but not top tier melee unit. On a larger scale balancing resources, they're definitely a step up from Ethiopian longswords, while remember adding in an extra element of speed. This isn't to say you'll actually use them to counter longswords, as Ethiopians have faster firing crossbows to do that already, but at least suggests the lower HP for higher damage stat trade-off is a fair trade in melee. Maybe their most natural role is to counter eagles. There's a combination of bonus damage and also speed working here, first running them down, and then with balanced resources ending with nearly 3/4 of their strength left over. So if nothing else, they clearly have at least one helpful role. Perhaps Shotel's most infamous use though is sneak attacking buildings, particularly town centers. If we look at their damage against unupgraded town centers, compared to the Knight's 233 damage per minute and the Longsword's 270 to 330 depending on if they have arson, Shotels are another jump up at 390 to 450. Battering rams and mangonels initially appear to be doing significantly more, but remember Shotels are pretty cheap and quick to mass. In fact, 2 battering rams, 5 mangonels, and 8 Shotels are all doing about the same amount of damage, just to put things into perspective. I wouldn't actually try to use 8 Shotels against a town center, as of course the town center can fire back, but a good mass of 20 or more Shotels will very quickly bring down most buildings. One pro tip when attacking town centers with Shotel Warriors is not to target town centers too early. Here you can see the pathing becomes a bit of a mess, with Shotels bumping all over each other to surround the building. Instead, a much better way to go is to right-click the far side of the town center and wait until they're underneath of it to then attack, and you can see it's just much cleaner. It may only save a couple of seconds in this case, but it's the fast way to turn that town center into a down center. Naturally, Shotels are then also very good at tearing through any other production buildings, markets, etc. as well, though be careful around castles. While 20 Shotels can reliably snipe town centers, you'll need at least 30 to take on a castle with murder holes, and even then it can be pretty expensive. In a similar vein to raiding buildings, the unit is also fairly quick at picking off villagers, needing just 3 hits, or 2 when fully upgraded, combined with their high movement speed to chase them down. Shotels don't survive a lot of arrows, but this is definitely a situation they can do a game-changing amount of damage in just a few moments. Another general use case for the unit is then soft countering melee cavalry. For example, even without their unique tech, they trade evenly with balanced resources against knights, though obviously you want the unique tech for 3 less damage taken on every hit, and with that tech, they end up with close to half their HP left over. Ethiopians do have camels, who also benefit from this tech, so Shotels may not be your first choice against knights, but it's something they can do in a pinch. In fact, with equal numbers, a Shotel can be almost as effective against a knight as a single pikeman, obviously adding in a gold cost, but then also a lot of speed that the pikeman doesn't have. Again, even if Shotels aren't your first choice against cavalry, getting free pike upgrades and having camels is just something Shotels are surprisingly good at. That's nothing compared to how good they are against camel civs though, where your own camels would be taking bonus damage and Shotels do not. A good archer civ like Ethiopians won't necessarily run into a lot of camels, but Shotels are insanely good against them, both without and especially with their unique tech, with Saracen camels losing 5 times the value of the Shotels from a balanced starting point. Again though, Ethiopians are mostly an archer civ with access to their own camels, so they don't really have a glaring weakness to cavalry civs, and it feels like Shotels aren't really addressing a need. If anything, we'd probably prefer a unique unit that did a good job tanking damage and can stand in front of Ethiopian faster firing crossbows and arbalesters, which is unfortunately a role Shotel Warriors are decidedly not good at performing. In fact, looking at the various options Ethiopians have to put in front of their archers, Shotels are among their worst at tanking damage, surviving only 1 more crossbow shot than a pikeman and far less than their cavalry options, despite those missing bloodlines. Even against skirmishers, they have the same problem, with Shotels being below average among the Ethiopians' options, while remember costing 10 gold more than longswords. It leaves Shotels outside looking in on the typical Ethiopian game plan of archers, as they're just not a natural meat shield unit. That still leaves them with a few roles and tricks up its sleeve, particularly when resistance to mounted units, its speed, or its high attack against buildings can come into play. They're a step above a novelty unit, but combine a few strengths with some very exploitable weaknesses. Next though, let's talk about the Imperial Age, where in some ways I feel like the unit falls off a bit, but arguably improves in one underappreciated way. To start with the elite upgrade itself, it's fairly middle of the road in cost, at 900 food and 450 gold, adding plus 5 HP, plus 2 attack, plus 1 against buildings, and an underappreciated plus 1 pierce armor that somewhat addresses their weakness to ranged units. One hidden extra benefit as well is their creation time is cut from 8 to just 4 seconds. That's already very fast, but conscription then cuts that down to 3, while then a Berber ally researching their Castle Age unique tech knocks that down to just 2.4 seconds. Amazingly, you need 52 farmers just to maintain the food cost from one castle. That said, while you can clearly make a lot of them quickly, Imperial Age is actually a time the unit begins to struggle at some things they had been pretty good at earlier on. For example, where in Castle Age they beat generic swordsmen pretty handily, in Imperial Age they only trade about 1 for 1 with generic champions. Keep in mind, Ethiopians max out at two-handed swordsmen, so elite Shotels may still be the Ethiopians' best infantry in melee, but relative to a lot of benchmarks, they're just not quite as good as they were. For another benchmark, while they beat knights with balanced resources in Castle Age, in Imperial Age, even with their unique tech, they're basically on par with cavaliers and lose outright to generic paladins, so they're not as overtly anti-cavalry in the late game. One thing they end up being at least okay at doing though is countering trash units. Shotels are, as expected, very good against Hussars, especially with their unique tech, and can be useful for cleaning up Hussars raiding your farmers if that's getting out of hand. Their speed and plus 1 pierce armor then make them at least okay against skirmishers, though you have to make sure not to trickle them into a large mass, or they can get overwhelmed. They're also then just okay against halberdiers, not really justifying the gold cost in my opinion, but they at least win with balanced resources. In Imperial Age, of course, they're still going to be weak against ranged units, though between 1 pierce armor from the elite upgrade and plus 2 from blacksmith armor, they technically perform a tiny bit better in the archer and especially skirmisher matchup, here with the shots taken in Castle Age in white and Imperial Age in cyan. It's a way I think the elite upgrade can be underrated for that plus 1 pierce armor. So where does all of this leave the unit? Again, I wouldn't say they're purely a novelty, though eating town centers is definitely something they're useful for doing now and then. The fact that Ethiopians are pushed so heavily into archers just naturally creates other situations they can contribute, for example against eagle civs or Hussars in Imperial Age. The key is to not try to force them to be something they're not, and rely on them as a sponge for skirmishers, or try to use them as body blockers for your archers against heavy cavalry. They're not that much better than the spear line at doing those sorts of things, and definitely not if you're valuing gold. A bit like Karambit Warriors for Malay, Berserks for Vikings, or Samurai for Japanese, Shotels simply give Ethiopians an alternative to archers that you can build around and make the Civ less predictable. Undoubtedly, the greatest feature for trivia's sake is simply their creation speed in the late game, especially with a Berber ally. I sometimes wonder where I'm even going to put all these units that just keep coming out, but then I remember the infinite hotel paradox, where if you have an infinitely large hotel with all of its rooms filled, you can always make room for one more arrival by having every guest step out and move one room down in unison. The infinite Shotel Hotel tells us something fundamental about the nature of infinity, and if you're into math puzzles and paradoxes like this, be sure to check out the selection of math books offered by my new online business, Spirit of the Logarithm. You can order a book today from a great website made with this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform for entrepreneurs to stand out and succeed online. Whether you're just starting or managing a growing brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create a great-looking website, engage with your audience, and then sell anything from products to content to time, all in one place. Using either their pre-made templates or Squarespace's AI-enhanced website builder, you can create a fully customized website to suit your needs. It's perfect for building an online presence for a physical business or starting an online store using their built-in tools for inventory and shipping, with plenty of analytics to give you insight about your website's traffic and sales. Go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/spiritofthelaw to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So that was my show and tell about the Shotel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.